Thank you for that intro, and welcome everyone. Um, so yeah, we'll just get started right away. And this is looking at the understand phase and tools we can use to deepen our understanding. So just briefly, very simple agenda. So first, most of you may be familiar with what I mean by understand phase, but it might be new to some of you. So we're going to first look at that, make sure we all understand what that means, understand what understand means. And then we're each going to present three different tools that kind of look at how to expand our understanding of that phase. I guess I'm going to say the word understand a lot. Um, and then we'll have time for questions at the end. Um, so what is this understand phase? So you may be familiar with this framework of these sort of three aspects of when we're kind of either discussing a proposal or a problem. First, we kind of say understand, explore, and decide. Um, so we're looking at this first piece because sometimes we tend to skip that understand phase. We like, oh, we all know what we're talking about. Let's just get to the action. Let's get to making decision. It's quicker. But we're going to explore like the benefits and how to expand that phase. And there are benefits to doing this. This is kind of a list that I'll just go through. One, it generates more creative solutions because oftentimes I'm often in a meeting where people will say, okay, here's the problem, here's the solution, and they've come up with it, and maybe a very great solution, but having skipped that kind of stage of like getting everyone's feedback, we just kind of end up acting out of habit sometimes and not being as creative as we could be. Also, getting more people involved and expanding this understand phase can save time later. Sometimes we're like, oh, this is what we can just skip this phase, but it can save time in the long run because sometimes when people come with a solution already, it's people might say, oh, okay, that's safe enough. We'll go for it, but they haven't had the time to really think about if it's really addressing the problem. That's why we have that as our title. Wait, what was our actual problem? Because I've been in meetings and be like, wait, what? I don't, you're like almost to the end of the discussion process, or that you're at the consent level and you're like, wait a minute, I actually don't understand what the problem is. And so it can save time if we do that earlier. It helps us base decisions on our observations and sort of break down. So if we take time to break down what is the actual current situation, are we observing it, or are we just basing it on again, maybe our habits or our assumptions? It just sort of breaks those, makes us look more clearly at the distinction between observe what our observations are and what our judgments or interpretations are of the situation. And it can also, if we go through this stage, it can also uncover problems that we might have that aren't going to be solved by adding another policy, because what the problem actually is that our policy or the decisions we've made in the past are perfectly fine. They're just not being implemented well. And sometimes we just pile policy onto policy and have this logbook that nobody's reading, when really we have a much different kind of problem. But there are risks with sort of expanding the stage. It does take longer in the moment. We kind of all, many of us have this tendency to oh, let's get to the point, right? And so we need to have patience. And because of that, people can experience process fatigue. Again, just want to kind of get to the point. And and doing this needs to be balanced with this idea in sociocracy of being safe enough and being open to experimentation. So sometimes you do just want to like, oh, let's just try this one thing and see if it works. And that's a huge strength in sociocracy to be able to do that. But sometimes we need to balance it with like taking a much a bigger overview of things and taking the time to really understand the problem. So we're going to talk about three different scales. We'll each present three different tools that can be used at different scales. And we're going to go from the smaller to the larger scale in general, but really elements of these can be used in various ways, and we'll have examples of that. I think that's it. And so, Jan.
Yeah, thank you. First tool, peeling the onion. This is inspired by nonviolent communication, which will obviously plays a crucial role in sociocracy on several occasions. And it is really targeted for a facilitator, or we will talk about this example of a facilitator sitting basically in a meeting, and there comes an objection, which is illustrated here. Somebody objects, for example, painting a wall blue and says it's such a cold color. So what do we do with that? Quite a difficult objection, because it is not really clear on what's behind it. As a facilitator, as a people with a sociocratic mindset, we know, oh yeah, there has to be a valid point. This doesn't come from nowhere. But how do we get to this valid point? And peeling the onion and the process of nonviolent communication, the four-step principle, is supposed to help us with that. And can you go to the next slide? So this tool really is supposed to help us facilitating empathy and going into an objection with an empathetic mindset and with a strategy that supports us as facilitator to be empathetic. Improving proposals, obviously, at the end of every objection is the goal to improve a proposal and integrating the unmet need that is behind the objection. And this tool is also supposed to help us to create a safe space. There's a question about share the slides of the tools. At the end, sorry. Okay, that's not relevant for now. Yeah, creating a safe space because, well, that is what nonviolent communication does. Everybody gets heard and we're able to hear everybody at their core. So this tool is supposed to help us with this. And we're first going to make a short synchronization about like the basic idea that is underlies this onion model. And then we dive into the onion model and the process and have an example on how this could look like in practice. And could you go to the next slide? So first, synchronization on nonviolent communication, basically. Four principles or four basic assumptions that are relevant for us in this context. Nonviolent communication says we as humans, we all share the same universal needs. So at the end, we all have the same needs that need to be fulfilled. And this is also where we all can come together. And everybody has a specific strategies, which are like their way to meet their needs, or which are our ways to meet our needs. And strategies is not meant like a strategy that we know from a company context, or I don't know, a long-term strategy. The word strategy in this context means it's our specific way of meeting our needs. If I want to paint the wall blue, this is a strategy for me to meet some kind of need that I have. This is how the word strategy is used in nonviolent communication. And also important to be clear on is we often rely very heavily on a specific strategy that we have in mind. I don't know, we want to paint a wall blue, to stay with that example, because I don't know, we have a need for safety at the end, and this idea came to us, or we could make it blue. Maybe we are not even conscious what the need is that is lying underneath it, but we are really like hooked on this strategy, and we really want to do this. And if somebody objects or has a different way of doing it, we get into trouble. There's a potential for conflict, and just heavily relying on strategies is what often makes it difficult to find other ways. And this is also the fourth point. By focusing on the needs and getting aware of what kind of need is underneath my strategy, we are able to get more creative, and we are able to come together and find a different way that meets our needs, and hopefully meets the needs of all the other people that are involved as well, and therefore creating a solution that is in the spirit of sociocracy. Okay, the onion model. What is the onion model? It's a needs consciousness framework. It is called onion because out of NVC, we basically say that our needs, they are like the core in our motivation, or what is at the core of our strategies. It is overlaid with feelings that we have. And these feelings, again, are overlaid with strategies. So it's like an onion with 3 layers. So our feelings stem from our needs, and our strategies stem from our feelings at the end. So these are all connected. And what we want to do when we want to find different strategies, or talk about an objection, or talk with a person about their objection, we want to peel this onion, and that's the next slide. That's why this tool is called like that. It is important for us as facilitator to peel the onion layer by layer. If we don't do it layer by layer, if we smash the onion, it won't work. We need to go layer for layer, strategy through feelings, through needs, with the person that is objecting, or at least try. Often it's enough to try that, to really get at the core of the things, and that's the next slide. Thanks. To really get at the core of the needs, and from there a new strategy can arise. Like an onion, if we peel it and we plant the core in the ground again, something new can grow from it. Exactly, and that's like the 4-step principle, which is also known from nonviolent communication. We go through the strategy, through the feelings, identify the need, and then we can come up with a new proposal, or in NVC we call it a wish. So how do we do it? Next slide. These 4 steps look like that. The first thing we do when somebody objects, we mirror their strategy. So this can look like, we basically say what I hear you saying, and then we sum it up. What can be observed, to also be parallel to nonviolent communication? What is it that we can observe? What are you proposing? So somebody says, I want to paint the wall blue, and we are mirroring back. Okay, so you want to paint the wall blue. Really make sure this is not only for us to make sure that we have understood it correctly, but it also gives the other person the feeling of being seen, which is often a need that is unmet. And as far as somebody is not under the impression of being seen, we can't really start. So that's also why we peel the onion, and we spend some time on the first layer, so that people really are under the impression they are seen. And then we go deeper. Once this is established, we go to the feeling. And this is, we guess basically what the feeling is. Okay, you wanna paint the wall blue. So are you like anxious that it will be another color, or we just guess? We all have an intuition of what is really moving the other person, and we try to touch into that and dig it up. And we do that by guessing, because most of the time, or not most of the time, often we are wrong, or we don't hit it like right on the spot, the feeling that the other person is having, but just trying is enough. Normally, when I guess a feeling, the person say, no, that's not it. It's more like, and then the person explains the feeling more in depth. And this is how like you get deeper and get more behind what is actually going on with this person. And the third step is we guess the need. Once the feeling is established, we guess, no, is this maybe about, and then we go like at the core, at the root problem, is this maybe about safety, or is this about, I don't know, whatever there is. And from there, we can ask question, how could this also be met? Could this also be met by a different strategy? We can suggest something because the other person feels seen, and something new can come of it. And to illustrate this in practice, a little example how this could look like. Oh, I need to make it a little bit bigger. I can't read it. So the onion in there is like the person that objects, and the peeler is like the facilitator in this example. And the onion, for example, says, I object painting the wall blue. It's such a cold color. And we as facilitators, we can say, oh, so you don't want to work in a blue office. The onion says, yeah, my childhood room was blue. I always wanted orange. So there's by just asking, people normally start to tell you what's behind this already, but on a strategy level. So we can go deeper until the person feels really understood. We can ask, oh, so you weren't allowed to decide which color your room had. And the onion says, yeah, my father had a clear plan for the interior design of the house, and I wasn't allowed to participate in the decision. So that's just an example, but where it already shows people, they start to talk about what's really relevant if we just mirror them and not bring our own ideas into the conversation, but just mirror what's going on. And once the person has established a little bit of background, we have enough to guess into the feeling. For example, I can imagine this quite frustrating. So frustration maybe is the feeling. And if we're lucky, the person just says yeah. If, sometimes the person says, no, it's more like this and that, and we can spend some time on the feeling. And once this is established, you can ask, so blue represents an unmet need for autonomy and freedom for you, and that is why you don't want to consent to the proposal. And also here, if we are right, the person says, yeah, I guess so, that's it. And here also, it illustrates why it is important not to smash the onion, because if the person says, I object painting the wall blue, it's such a cold color, and we say, so blue represents an unmet need for autonomy and freedom, the person just says, what are you talking about? I don't want the wall to be blue. So taking a little bit time for each step and guiding the other person kind of through it opens up a room to be more honest and talk about themselves and the background of a situation. And yeah, from that we can go on and make suggestions, or we can ask. And that is peeling the onion. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So I'll now talk about our second tool, which we're calling identifying the driver. And this comes from Sociocracy 3.0. So some of you might be quite familiar with it. And what it is, so identifying the driver is stating, so going through a process of creating a statement and then consenting to describing the problem before we collect possible solutions to it. So again, this is in the understand phase before we want to do explore options. And it has three main steps. The first step is to describe the current tension, or the so an attention is, I guess, the current situation. So what's going on now? What is the desired effect? So what is the outcome that we want? And the gaps between it, and why it's important for the organization to address this current tension. And then the second step, which is, these two steps are really simple, and then we just create a statement for the driver, and then we consent to the driver statement. So those are more simple, and we'll just deal with the first step. So the first step it might look very easy to okay, what is the current situation? We might come into a meeting where we all know what's going on, but often we just think we know what's going on. And so we want to take some time to make some observations that we can all agree to about what actually is going on. And these observations, um, we want to look at what are the negative impacts. So that's usually why we're dealing with the situation. So what is the current situation causing? But we also want to look at the greater context. So because sometimes because we're not in we might agree something's a problem, but we're not agreeing what effects it's having or what is causing it. The other piece is what are called antecedents. So those are the causes. So what is or but if we think of it in more neutral language, an antecedent is really like what is coming before the problem that it's arising. Because again, we want to put this in very sort of um, value-free language, and there really isn't, I don't think, such a thing as like a pure observation that we can make, but the goal of making things more observational or stating them as more observational is that the sort of closer you get to this ideal of a pure observation, the less room there is for disagreement, right? We're much more likely to agree on if we can observe something and say, yes, we all have this shared reality that sales are declining, rather than like, oh, so and so is doing a bad job at selling, right? And so that's why we want to stay at the level of observation as much as possible. But it is also, interpretations do have a place in in describing the situation, because sometimes, and this is like, so asking the question, well, what is this really about? And sometimes this is really useful if there's like a conflict. Sometimes you might have a conflict between two people, um, and it might be about, they might be arguing about what they're going to do next, or what project the project they're working on. But sometimes it's really, if you ask this question, it's really about like some other thing that they don't want to talk about, like some long-standing like problem. And so getting people's like interpretations of the situation is also a way to describe the situation. And what you want to do at the end of this step is to check to see if there's shared reality about the current situation, because sometimes people think something's a problem, but not everyone agrees it's a problem, or doesn't agree what's causing the problem. So that's the goal of the first step, to have that shared reality. And then the second step of this, or I guess it's 1B, is to ask ourselves what is the desired outcome. Now we may already have. Sometimes this is like really obvious, like because it should fit with the aim of the circle or the goal of the organization, but it's not. That's not always the case. So we want to look at how the current situation is different from what we're expecting. Um, and sometimes this involves recommitting to the desired outcome, because sometimes you're in this spot where you're like, oh, well, actually, I have a different, like I've been in meetings where the circle has been established for a long time. There are older people there who created the aim of the circle. Everybody is like, oh, we know exactly what we meant when we described the aim. And then new people come in and we assume they have the same understanding that we do, but they don't. And it's not until you have a conflict or a problem where people are like, oh, that's what you meant by when you stated the aim. And so we want to like recommit to, oh, actually, this is what we mean by the desired outcome. And so the goal of this step is to make sure that there's agreement about what we expect in the future. And especially if you're having a conflict or a problem that you need to address, you do want to ask this question and just not assume that everybody has the same understanding about what we want to happen. And then because this process is can take time, it's important to you're not going to do this with every like problem that you have. But you're gonna want to ask the question, why is it important to solve this? And to take the time to have maybe create a new policy or whatever it is. So you want to ask the question, how does sorry, it being how does dealing with this situation improve the organization? Like, why do we need to do this? What are the benefits of meeting the desired outcome, and what are the risks, or what are like sometimes again you can kind of skip this because it might be obvious, like if you have an agreed upon aim, but you also want to balance that with like the time that it's going to take to maybe address this problem. Um, and sometimes asking the question, what happens if we do nothing? Like sometimes you're like, okay, yeah, this is an issue, but it's going to just take too much beyond our capacity to deal with it. And so maybe to do nothing is something that's easier for us to deal with. Um, and so the goal of this stage is to ask ourselves, okay, is intervening actually worthwhile? Now that we like understand the problem, yeah, we agree it's a problem, but we want to do this extra step of making sure that it's worth our time to address it. Um, and then you kind of just, and then steps 2 and 3 step 2 is you create the driver statement. So here's an example of of a statement that you would create after doing all this work. So the example shows that, so the current wait list for our clients is 4 weeks. You can see this is just like an observational statement. It's really easily proven or disproven. People can look it up. There shouldn't be a lot of argument around whether that's true or not. So that's where the observation comes in. And this results in a growing number of complaints and clients stating they are moving on to another organization. Again, this is pretty observational. You can kind of imagine a situation where you might have complaints, or you might have clients moving on to another organization and you're not sure why, and people might have disagreements about why. But when you've gone through this process, then hopefully you can agree. The aim of creating this driver statement is to say, yes, we actually all agree that the reason people are complaining is because of this. It's a long time on the wait list. So you've described this current situation. Again, so then you move on to so then the second part of the driver statement is you say something like, we're not meeting our client targets. So you state the undesired outcome. Again, this might be obvious that this is undesirable, but you can imagine that a situation where you might have a long wait list and people are leaving, but you've got so much work to do anyway. So it's actually not a problem, I mean, it's kind of like, oh, this is a good problem to have because we're so busy and we couldn't like attend to all the needs of the people. We couldn't, have all the clients on the wait list anyway. So this is like making sure that no, actually this is a problem because we're not, that people are leaving because we're actually not meeting the targets. And then this is like, and the reason that this is important, right? Because maybe, again, it might not be a big deal. Like, oh, maybe we want to adjust our targets. That was the problem, right? And so, but actually why it's important to deal with this is because we run the risk of being under budget, right? And that's why like it's super critical that we deal with this. That's why this is a high priority. That's why we're going to spend time and you can imagine like you might have a situation where people come in and be like, oh, there's a 4 week wait list. We got to do something about it. And people are arguing about, well, who cares, or what is the issue? And it's important to have gone through this process in order to get everybody like on the same page, and that can save time later on. And so you create this driver statement, and then everyone consents to it, and then you can go to like, okay, now what are we going to do about it? But that's the tool for that first part of that understand stage. And then Roberto is going to talk about the next tool, the third tool.
Yes, thank you. So I'm going to talk about a tool that is called S-train mapping, and I will tell you why in a minute. So I will talk about where does this notion of S-train mapping come from, what are the elements, and I will build it the explanation mostly upon an example, trying to illustrate the usage. We are going, as Anne said at the beginning, we are going to increasing approaches of looking at the bigger and bigger picture. So this is really for strategic thinking in complex situations. Next slide, please. So it is built upon a framework. Some of you may have heard of the Kinevin framework, which emerges from about 20-ish years of research on complexity, and mostly on anthro-complexity, so complexity of human systems. And basically, the idea is to have a tool about tools. It's a tool. The framework is a tool to understand what is the best tool to use in a given situation. And the situations are separated in two main categories. On the right, you have the ordered system, so things that are either clear or complicated, but still ordered. And by complicated, I mean something like a clockwork. So a clock is a very complicated thing, but it's very predictable at the same time. On the other side, you have the disordered area, where you have complex. And a typical example for complexity is a dish of spaghetti. Anybody can create a dish of spaghetti. It's much easier to do than building a clock, but it's totally unpredictable compared to a clock. If you pull one spaghetti, you don't know what's going to happen to the whole system. If you're unlucky, you're in the chaotic situation where things are even messier. And the tool that I'm going to describe today is really about trying to make sense of complex situation, not about chaos, but of complex situation where you do the same thing twice and you don't get the same result in a sense. So the idea is, and this is something that can be used, for example, to define strategies at the beginning of setting up a new organization, or for a big change, program in an existing organization, where the dimensions are too many to start listing the dimension. The decisions are too many to be just in a linear process. We want to build a picture, a map of a situation, but at the same time, we have to take into account the fact that the area that we are mapping is changing. So next slide. That's where the estuarine notion comes out. The estuarine is this area where you get the river that goes to the ocean, but the area is very flat. In the ocean, there might be high and low tide. So sometimes you have water flowing in one direction. Sometimes you have water flowing the other direction. Sometimes you have sandbanks, but the day after they're not there anymore. In some areas, you have rocks. So these are stable areas. So that is the metaphor that we use to describe a system that is complex, changing, and you still need to have a common understanding on what the system looks like. Next slide, please. So we will start by doing a discovery of the components. We call them actants, but basically there are three key components. There are constraints. So everything that structures or influences the system can also be positive things, not necessarily negative. School is a constraint. You have to go to school, but it's an enabling constraint, because once you've gone to school, you have earned a degree and you can get a job. So it's a positive constraint from that point of view. You have actors that are really any person, and increasingly with artificial intelligence, maybe also artificial objects capable of acting with some sort of intelligence. And then we have what we call constructors, that are elements that repeatedly produce the same thing. For example, ceremonies, marriage. Marriage is a constructor of legally united couples. So next slide. I will give you as an example. For example, we start with by putting the constraints in our mapping, and this is an example that comes from a discussions about security and safety in a small city in the outskirts of Paris. It was triggered within a group of people say, what can we do about security in our city. It was triggered by a dad who was shocked that his daughter was body searched at the entrance to school because the school administration was afraid of weapons. And so you see the type of constraints that we have identified in this environment. From in the bottom, the homelessness, transportation, public transportation, knowledge about available social support, funds available, administrative constraint, house pricing, local regulation. You see they follow a map. So they are mapped on two dimensions. The vertical dimension is the energy that it takes to modify those constraints, and the horizontal dimension is the time that it takes to modify those constraints. Next slide. We actually map in a much larger scale. So we have now a bigger map where we have distributed, and that's the landscape that we're going to work on. But that reflects what I showed you before. At the bottom, on the right bottom, on the left bottom, you have areas that are very volatile. So this would be our sandbanks, and that's where we put homelessness. At the top right, you have things that are very solid. It takes a lot of energy and a lot of time to change. So that will be our rocks. And that's what we call counterfactual, because it's very difficult to change. So next slide, please. So then we're going to look at the actors. I will not go through all the actors that we have identified, but for example, we have the native local citizen with a migration background, homeless people, health services, local elected politicians, police, other services, and so on. So these are the actors that we're going to place next to the constraints that are relevant. And then we have the constructors. Next slide. And for example, our elections, local election or national election, a populist discourse that generates polarization among the population, which is something that is usually a trigger for violence and tension. So next slide, please. We place all our actants now, the actors and the constructors next to the constraints that are relevant for them, and that helps us create a map that we can discuss among the various people. And here around the table, we would bring all the stakeholders that are involved in making a decision, and there could be disagreement on what the elements are. And in order to resolve this disagreement, we break them in smaller parts until everybody can find something that they can share. So we may not agree on what direction we want to go globally, but we have now a map that we can use to talk about the problems together, and we all have the same background for discussion. And on top of this background, next slide, please. We can start identifying actions. And here, again, there's some very simple, quick examples. It would be much further than that, but basically build some advocacy through association, or participate to the election campaigns in order to put pressure onto the political decision. Try to connect different local organizations and institutions, or doing information campaign. And next slide, please. The place in this map will help us understand which actions we can focalize, we can focus in priority. At the top right, it's areas that are very hard to change. So maybe we don't put all of our energy over there. In the center, this is the area where we can act. So this is an area where we can build our actions and start in the short term, not again with this, that resonates with the sociocratic approach. What can we do now? Safe to try. That's probably where we can find the areas that are safe to try, and we have more chances to find agreement of what are the next action. The last step would be to assign those actions to roles and circle, and that point maybe refine the decisions using more traditional picture forming, proposal shaping, going into the detailed dimensions and work on that. And that is it for me. Thank you.
Yeah, so these are our 3 tools for deepening understanding and getting on the same page. And I invite you now to ask questions. I understand, Audrey, you are reading out questions if there were any in the chat. Is that correct?
Yeah, we don't have any accumulated questions in the chat for now, but we can open the gate now by asking for questions. So thanks a lot for your presentation. It was so well structured and easy to follow, even if there was some complexity in there. So thanks to the 3 of you. And oh, I already see one hand raised. So let's hear you, Diggle.
Yeah, hi. Thank you very much for this very inspiring talks. And I have a question for Jan. I found this talk about peeling the onion very intriguing. And some parts of it reminded me of Getting to Yes, this framework for successful negotiations, where they do make the difference between interests and positions. It's like desires and demands, if you want. What I was asking myself was, isn't it a bit risky to sort of psychologize a person in a group setting by diving very deep into what's behind the demand or the objection?
So risky, what do you mean by risky? Do you have something in mind that could happen, or?
That maybe the person could feel exposed in some way?
Well, in my experience, at the end, peeling the onion is just being human, first and for all. And it helps us being human by giving some guidelines. And well, if you have a superior motive of kind of trying to figure out what's wrong with you, or if you have kind of this mindset, which obviously a psychologist would have, because they need to label people and what kind of disease do they have. If you go into it with that mindset, I have made very bad experience. That is true. People don't react very well to it if you ask them questions that they don't want to answer, that don't really stem from the situation, but from your superior motive. So yes, risky. Well, if you have the wrong mindset, obviously everything can be risky. But if this tool really invites you to stay in the moment and connect with the other person, what is actually happening, and when you do that in an empathetic way, there's no risk to it in my experience.
Okay, thank you. Maybe it's because it's me asking, because I am in fact a psychologist.
Okay, well, then we know where it's coming from.
But I'm not a clinician. I don't do assessments of this kind of sort. But thank you very much.
Yeah, I like what you said, Jan, because humans, sometimes we don't know, but we feel like intentions. We detect. It could be the same words, but just the tone. And yeah. Sheila, you can ask your question.
Yes. So the 3 of you have collaborated for this presentation. I'm curious, and I understand the common thread that these are all ways of understanding the issue better. I'm curious if there's some relationship among the 3. Are these just 3 different options, or I don't know if the 3 of you work together in some context. Do you put these together, or are these just 3 separate options?
I guess I could. Well, we were all Academy 2 students for SOFA. That's how we met, and this was a project that came out of our work there. But I don't know if I can really like yeah, because it just evolved over time, this presentation about, and I think at first we were like, wait, what is the connection between these? I think we asked ourselves that question. And then we were like, oh yeah, they're really all, expanding like understanding and have that thread in common. But I don't know if Jan or Roberto, you have a better memory of how it all evolved.
No, I think you explained it well. It was really our own reflection and see how can we what do we use into exploring in the exploring phase, and we realized that we have these three different approaches, and they actually kind of complemented nicely. So it was kind of serendipity that they really nicely built on top of each other.
So when you say build on top of each other, have you actually done that with a
No.
with a group?
No,
Okay,
no,
so
it was separate
this
reflections
is just
that
that what they
intellectually build on each other.
intellectually. Okay, that I understand. Yeah.
What a great question. Thank you for asking. Eduardo.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for the absolutely extremely process that they're sharing. And this is a space I really enjoy and try to cultivate about complexity and co-creating solutions. And would like to ask if you explored a bit across within this and liberating structures, because I have the feeling from what you shared that there is a lot in common there about with liberating structures, this idea, and also sociocracy, right? This idea of what's the minimum structure we need in order to make collective intelligence emerge.
Yeah, so the Kinevin model, I mean, it's not built on liberating structures, but it comes with a set of tools to facilitate, to do sense making, and there is a lot of resonance. I mean, they don't refer to each other, but when you look at the tool from one side and you really say, oh, okay, that's kind of cousins. Many of the tools, not everything, but many do.
Thank you very much. I got that same feeling you expressed very well. They kind of their cousins, like, oh, we're kind of similar. We didn't know, but we're similar. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And of course, if you ask them, they probably say, oh, no, that's totally different. And but yeah.
So many tools that we can plug in. This conference is really about what can we plug in with Sociocracy to make it work better. And like plugins, some could be in conflict and some could be in synergy. Great. I was seeing in the chat, the person could feel under the microscope about peeling the onion. I just wanted to say that in Sociocracy, that's kind of the point. Each hard turn, we're under the microscope. And if you have an objection, then we get to put you under the microscope just a little bit longer and a little bit more. And that's what we like. But it feels safe. It's a safe microscope. That's kind of what feeling heard is. And now, Adam, let's hear your question.
My question's like sort of along the same lines, is that I don't know, like in these circles, we always sort of take for granted that everybody knows that they don't like blue because their mother was a mermaid and they loved water or whatever, and they spent a lot of time underwater or whatever. I don't, whatever the psychological sort of the depths are of why we feel the way we feel. I mean, just like with the peel of the onion, like what happens if you come to a point where they're like, I don't know why, I just hate blue. Like, and I don't have like the, I don't know why, I just cannot do it. Like, what's the next step after that? Is there one? Have you like encountered that in your application?
Yes. And basically it needs more time. So often there's, I guess this is a question that comes back to the basic principles of sociocracy and how to deal with objections. Then you try to find a compromise by shortening the term or measuring the concern in some way. So this is how most of the things can actually be solved. I think peeling the onion is more like thank you, to deep the conversation with whomever wants to. Obviously, you can't do it if they don't want to, and some people just say, I don't know, leave me alone, I have some other problem here, and then we can't force them. We can just invite them, and this is a way to invite people.
Thank you.
Cheers,
We
thank
have
you.
2 more minutes and one question from Eduardo. Well, let's hear your question in a brief way so that we can have a conclusion after.
Kind of more of a reflection on what Adam and the rest people were saying. It's important to understand that all processes and tools have their boundaries. We, Dre, and other people in the Advocates for Sociocracy and Intentional Communities, Community of Practice, which is a great place to discuss these things, we were talking about borders, boundaries. Sociocracy can do a lot, but not everything. And then there are human issues that NVC can help a lot, but not everything. And sometimes it's good when just to say, we are going to go up to here and not from here to more or there, because that depends on a different thing, or this is not the space. Because Adam, I feel you, right? That could happen. And then there is a time in which you say, okay, this is not for this space. So we'll put it apart and keep on going, and then we will talk after. It's important to say, and then even say, I cannot help you with this. Let's find together something. Borders are important too. Thank you. That's it. Thank you, Dre, for your patience.
Well, I'm glad I did, because you restated something that I said in the advocates meeting, so now I feel heard. Great. I have just put the donation link in the chat just in case you're like, oh my God, this conference is so great. I didn't give enough when I subscribed. Now I need to give more. You have the link directly there. And I want to give big thanks to our 3 presenters. Maybe I want to share the question that I had without being answered, just so we all leave with it. But where's the balance in sociocracy between teaching, educating, changing culture, and getting things done? Like, how much is it our responsibility to know our needs and be able to voice our feelings and our needs when we have an objection? And how is it the facilitator or other people that need to support us in doing that? Balance. So do you want to say a last a word of the end, Jan, Anne, and Roberto, and then we will go to our next session.
I was just gonna say, I can put the slides in the chat unless Jan or Roberto, you have, is that cool? Okay. So yeah, you can all look at another request for slides. And thank you all. Yeah, this was great to have such great turnout.
Yeah, thanks a lot for listening to us and the tools, and I hope you take something with you.
Yeah, and I've seen some requests for more info. Send me a mail, and I will share the references to whoever is interested. And you can find me on Sociocracy for All. Shouldn't be a problem.
Great, and we have the link to the slides that's now in the chat. So I will let 1 more minute for everybody to close before I close the room for everyone. Thank you again, and see you in another room. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay, closing the room.